and welcome back to another episode of the Be a Better You podcast. I am your host, Allison K. Dagny. Today, we're going to be talking about the 10 signs that it wasn't you. It was emotional abuse. And the reason I want to bring this up today is because there are so many people out there who are putting all of the blame on themselves. First, not knowing that it was emotional abuse, and second, because it helps them make sense of the nonsense. So if you've ever walked away from a relationship thinking that you were the problem, or if you've ever ended a friendship thinking you were the problem, if you were in a family dynamic and you constantly think that you are the problem, if someone else left you and you think I was the problem, or maybe you're replaying the fights that you had with people or the disagreements or trying to figure out, well, like, what did I do wrong? Could I have handled this better? Then I want you to stay tuned because this episode is going to speak to you. I'm going to walk you through 10 signs it wasn't you. It was emotional abuse. Because when you've been in a relationship like this with someone who manipulates, gaslights, controls, warps your sense of reality, all that stuff, like you start carrying the weight of somebody else's behavior and beliefs and perceptions and calling it your own. So let's change that today. Before we begin, I just want to put this out there that I offer 30-minute consultations that are completely free for anyone who just needs to be heard, who is confused, who doesn't know which way to turn. And my goal on these 30-minute conversations is to help you identify what really has been in your way. You know, oftentimes we think that the thing that's holding us back is that we're just stuck, or that there's something wrong with us, or that we just can't get over the hump, or we're just always getting triggered, right? But that's not it. It's always something deeper. It's always something hidden in the subconscious mind. So in these 30-minute consultations, we can unpack that. And then what I can do is I can give you my best suggestions on what I think is going to help you the most. And I'll be really honest with you. If I think that the best thing for you is to join my community, or if it's to seek out support somewhere else, if my one-on-one program is a good fit, or maybe it isn't, right? Like, I'm not going to lead you in a direction just because. I want to help people, and I want you to get the results and the healing that you desire. So if this is something that you're interested in, you can go straight to my website at www.radiate, the letter N, rise.com. At the top, there's a little pink bar. You can click on it and you can schedule from there. These are no pressure kinds of calls. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want you to feel supported and give you some direction. So if that's something that you're interested in, please reach out. All right, so let's get into this now. The number one sign that it wasn't you, okay? Now, I'm saying number one. I'm just going, these aren't in like order of like strength or like the biggest sign or anything like that. These are random, okay? I'm just saying number one is the first one on my list. Is this constant need to explain yourself. This constant need to talk and to get people to hear you and to have them understand your position and your intention. Well, I didn't intend to do that and I didn't mean that, right? If this is something that you find yourself doing or you have found yourself doing in the past, this is a sign it wasn't you, it was emotional abuse. Because when you over-explain yourself, when you are trying to get people to hear your position or your point of view, this isn't because that you're just a talker or that you're annoying or that you're dramatic, right? It's none of that. It's because you are trying to avoid being misunderstood or being punished. And this can happen in childhood when we have parents who are emotionally abusive. This can happen in work situations. This can happen in friend groups. It can happen in romantic relationships. And that's probably where most people are thinking about this. But if you find yourself doing this now, or if you have done it in the past, right? The thing is, if you've done it in the past, chances are if you haven't fully healed, you're going to keep doing it in the relationships that you have now. So like, let's say you're no longer that little kid who was constantly getting in trouble and the parents were, always kind of up your butt saying like, what did you do wrong? And you're trying to explain, well, I did this and I did that. Like you're trying to explain. Chances are if you haven't healed those wounds, you're going to carry that behavior into other relationships. You're going to continue that pattern because it has served you. It has served you to avoid that either shame or guilt or feelings of being misunderstood or potentially punishment. And that could come in many different forms, like getting the silent treatment or having long conversations that are drawn out for hours that are criticizing you, things like that, right? So if you have either in the past or you currently are still doing that, this is a sign that you have likely been emotionally abused, okay? And part of the reason I want to share these things with you is because when I was in my marriage, I did not know emotional abuse was a thing. Like some people are like, how would you not know that? I knew verbal abuse was a thing. I knew that if somebody called you bad names or was constantly like yelling and screaming at you, that is verbal abuse. I knew that, and I knew what physical abuse was, but I didn't know these things about like coercion and gaslighting and different kinds of like manipulation tactics. I didn't know about those things, and I didn't know it fell under the umbrella of emotional abuse. So that's why I'm sharing these things with you. Okay, so that was number one. The second one on my list is that either you felt like this in the past or you feel like it now, that you need some sort of script or plan to speak about something before you ever bring up an issue. So think about it in terms of you have something that's on your mind and you want to talk about it with whoever it is, right? But you're really scared. So you think through your head, like, how can I say this the perfect way? And what kinds of things am I going to say that would not trigger them? And you are almost like in your mind walking eggshells before you ever bring up an issue. So you're maybe very, very careful about the words that you use. You might ask other people before you have those conversations, like, what do you think? Or how should I approach this? Or what's the best way that I can communicate this? And this isn't just anxiety, okay? This is a distinguishing factor. If you're needing a script before you're bringing up an issue to someone, it's not just that you have anxiety or that you are, clearly you are walking eggshells, but it's not just because like you have anxiety. It's because your nervous system is preparing itself for emotional backlash because you've experienced this so many times. You're trying to avoid that. Your nervous system doesn't want to be dysregulated. So when you think, okay, I need to have this conversation or I need to bring up this issue with this person, but I have to be very, very careful about how I do it because your nervous system wants to be calm, it wants to be resilient, and it doesn't want to experience things like it's experienced in the past. So if this is something that you have noticed a pattern in yourself, like, oh, I've got to talk to my mom, but I don't know what to say, and I have to think about it, and I have to, run these things and just say it the perfect way and be prepared, right? That is a form of like walking eggshells inside your own mind, okay? So that was number 2. Number 3 is that you apologize for things that aren't your fault or that you didn't even do, okay? And a lot of time, I've done this before many times, really just to keep the peace, okay? So it's not that you're just trying to, oh, I'm a good person, I'm a kind person, I'm an empath or whatever. No, you're doing it to survive. You are apologizing for things that aren't your fault as a trauma adaptation to being emotionally abused. So if you find yourself being the first one to raise your hand and say, I'm sorry, it's my fault, maybe it is your fault. Maybe you do need to apologize. That's different. What I'm talking about is something where, if you're in a relationship with somebody, there are 2 people in that relationship, right? It is not possible for one person to be completely at fault 100% of the time. It's just not possible. Okay? So if you find that the other person isn't taking accountability, the other person isn't apologizing, and anytime anything happens to disrupt the relationship, you are the one that's apologizing, this is a sign that it wasn't you, that it was emotional abuse. Or if it's happening to you now, even, that it is emotional abuse. Okay? Number 4 is that you either felt in the past or you feel now emotionally exhausted after every conversation. Like, legitimately, I need to take a nap. Like, I can't do my job. I can't do the dishes. I can't take care of myself. I can't even get a shower. I just want to crawl in bed. I'm so exhausted after every conversation. Because here's the thing. If you are spending and exerting so much energy defending yourself against attacks or blame, if you are deflecting, or maybe if someone is deflecting on you, if you're projecting, if they're projecting on you, whatever that is, like this takes a lot of energy. Okay? So it's not just about having a difficult conversation with someone, or it's not just about having an argument. I'm talking about all of the energy it takes to help yourself feel secure in that conversation. So if your nervous system is dysregulated, that's pulling a lot of energy out of you. If your heart rate is up, right? It's like you're running. Your heart rate gets up when you're physically active. You may not be able to eat because your stomach is in knots. Whatever that is, if you are feeling this exhaustion, like physical and emotional exhaustion. I said emotionally, but I also think physically sometimes it happens that same way because your whole body is part of this process. Because of like not having a safe person there to communicate with, somebody who is not willing to hear you, somebody who doesn't want to take accountability, somebody who's constantly blaming you for everything, right? You are defending yourself. You are having to manage their emotions at the same time as managing yours. That is taking up a ton of energy for you. So if you're feeling exhausted like this after every conversation with someone, this is a sign, okay? Number 5. You're second guessing your memory and your reality. We've all heard of this term gaslighting, and I'm going to clarify it right now because people get it really confused. Gaslighting does not just mean somebody is lying to you and trying to get you to believe their lie, okay? That's just straight up lying, okay? So if someone says you left the food out last night before you went to bed, and you said, no, I remember putting it away. And they said, no, you didn't. I remember you leaving it out, and I saw it when you went to bed. And you said, no. I specifically remember it, like, and you are sure, right? And then that person starts to say, yeah, but remember last week when you did that and you didn't remember, and then I had to tell you, and then you were like, oh, yeah, I did. You're right. And remember how, like, bad your memory has been, and remember how you couldn't think clearly and you couldn't remember the details of that conversation we had. Like, your memory is really, really bad. Like, so I know that you think you did that, but you actually didn't, and your memory is garbage. So you need to trust me on this because this is actually a problem. Like, you have a problem remembering things, and that never happened. So I hope that little rant did not give you like a triggering moment, but I have been on the other end of gaslighting, and I know what it feels like, and I know what the verbiage is and how people talk to you about it. So gaslighting is when people get you to second guess yourself, your memory, and your reality, okay? That's not a you problem. That's what gaslighting does to people, okay? Anybody can be a victim of gaslighting with the person who has the right verbiage and the right ways to start to cause you to doubt your reality. And that's what it does. And it's not your fault, Okay. But if you find that you are allowing someone else to have the authority on your life, you are leaning on somebody else because you don't know what's up and what's down, what's black and what's white, because your reality is so warped, this is a sign that it wasn't you, that it was emotional abuse. Okay? Number 6, you stop sharing your needs or your desires, not because you're low maintenance, which you might like to adopt that identity, but because you were trained that your needs did not matter. That over time, if you had shared things, that they were either dismissed or invalidated, or you saw that it resulted in something like a conflict or an accusation like that you're too needy, or that you ask for too much, things like that. So over time, you just stop doing it. So let me give you an example of this. This one has to do with financial abuse in my marriage. So there were a lot of times, like early on, where I wanted certain things. Like I wanted a new purse, or I wanted to go on a trip, or I wanted to buy some furniture for the patio, or like different things like that. And what would happen was when I would bring those things up, I would be accused of being wasteful, or I would be accused of having wants versus needs, and that was a bad mentality, that I would have caused my husband at the time to take longer in his job so that he couldn't retire early because we'd be spending all the money, even though we had plenty of money. So over time, I stopped asking for things, and I would do things that were a modification. So like, for instance, I might, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but if I couldn't get the furniture that I needed, then I would scour Craigslist, I would enlist the help of my ex-husband's father, and then we would like put together this bench that I was trying to create and paint it and like DIY, all that kind of stuff, right? So I was doing that stuff because I didn't want to feel like a bad person. I didn't want to feel like I was greedy, whatever it was that I was being accused of. Okay, so when you find yourself just like doing things a different way, or stopping the expression of your needs and wants and desires, this is a good sign that it was emotional abuse, because you're being trained that no, you can't have this, or no, you need to be quiet, or no, you're greedy, or no, you're needy, whatever those things might be. So this can look a lot of different ways for a lot of different people. That's just an example that I would share. Number 7 is that maybe you feel guilty, or you felt guilty for feeling hurt. Okay, so this is a big one too. So like if you were told that you were too sensitive, or you're dramatic, or you're overreacting, or just making it all about you, right? This is emotional invalidation. It's not feedback, okay? So there's a huge difference. If you have a problem, or you have an emotion, or you have a complaint about a behavior or whatever, right? And then someone is pushing that back on you and saying, no, wait, you're the problem for even bringing this up, or you're the problem because you're making a mountain out of a molehill, or you're overreacting, or you, or whatever, right? This is how people invalidate you to control you, okay? Because they don't want you bringing those things to their attention. Your emotions are uncomfortable for them. Your needs are something they don't want to meet. So if you're being told these things and you're getting this kind of invalidation, that is a sign that it was or is emotional abuse. You shouldn't feel guilty for feeling hurt if someone hurt you, okay? You shouldn't like dismiss yourself. So if someone hurts you, let's say someone lied to you, and you're really hurt by that, and you say, that really hurt me, like that really deeply hurt me that you would lie about that. But then that person turns around and says, oh my gosh, you're acting so crazy. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, why are you acting like this? Nobody else would think this way. Ask all of my friends, right? This is emotional invalidation. You are not supposed to feel guilty if you are feeling hurt. And if all of a sudden you start feeling like, oh, well, maybe I am being too sensitive, or maybe I am overreacting, or maybe it wasn't that bad, right? That is a sign, okay? Number 8. This is a interesting one, but that you always had to be in a good mood to avoid them being in a bad mood, okay? This is essentially walking eggshells, and it's a classic, very, very, very typical trauma response. It's not a personality trait of yours that you're just always a positive person and I never get angry and I'm never upset, right? But if you find that you don't really get angry very often, or it takes a lot, like I'll use myself as an example. I would say, and I can say this honestly to you today, that it takes a lot to get me in a bad mood. It takes a lot to upset me. And I actually believe that this is an adaptation from my past relationship. And I am working on that. I am working on trying to feel angry when I'm angry, to feel frustrated when I'm frustrated, to allow those emotions to come in, because this isn't something that just changes overnight. But I would often try to be the positive one. I would often try to look on the bright side. I would often try to just be happy, right? To avoid my ex getting upset with me, to avoid his moods, because I wasn't able to have my emotions because they would trigger him. So if you find yourself doing this, you find yourself, and I'm not saying that being in a good mood is a bad thing. It's not, right? And some people, it's genuine, like it is real. And I actually think that part of me is kind of jumping that old track from like just doing it from a protection standpoint, whereas it does take a lot for me to get upset now, because I've rewired my brain in a lot of ways as well. But it's important to honor your feelings. It's important to notice that you're angry and allow that to pass through, because if you don't honor your emotions and your body, they get stuck. But just know that this kind of walking on eggshells behavior and modifying your emotions just to protect someone else's, or just to manage someone else's emotions, is definitely a sign that it was emotional abuse. And just as a quick reminder, you are not responsible for other people's emotions. You might feel that you are because it makes your life easier if other people aren't emotional, aren't angry, aren't frustrated, aren't disappointed, whatever. So you may modify your behavior to get them to modify theirs, which not in a negative way, right? I don't want you to think that I'm saying this from a negative perspective, but that can sometimes be a manipulation to help you feel safe, okay? The 9th one on my list is that you question your worth. But typically, okay, so we should go all the way back to childhood. If you in your childhood never felt good enough, then we can attribute that to your upbringing, your parents, the society that you lived in, your caregivers or whatever, right? But let's say you didn't feel like that as a kid. You felt worthy, you felt good enough, and then you were in a relationship with someone or a friendship with somebody, and then afterwards you started questioning your worth, then you can pin it on that, right? You can pin it on that person and that relationship. Because if your self-esteem and your self-worth was eroded from that relationship, then like afterwards you notice it, then that, or maybe in it, then that's a sign of emotional, erosion, I guess. Not that your just insecurities are just bubbling to the surface and showing up, okay? So think back to your childhood. Did you feel worthy and good enough in your childhood? If the answer is yes, then fast forward to your next relationship where you started to feel bad about yourself, where you started to feel like you had no self-worth. That is where you want to focus, because chances are it was emotional abuse and that person was doing it on purpose. If it goes back all the way to childhood, then again, we can pin that on caregivers, parents, people in your life at that time. But I'm not saying pin it on them like it's their fault. It is their fault. But the tricky part here isn't just blaming. It is also acknowledging that it happened and taking accountability and responsibility for your own healing. Because even if it did happen to you, that doesn't mean it has to be your story as you keep going forward in life. You get to choose that. Okay? So if you are questioning your worth after a relationship, after childhood, after a working relationship, a friendship, whatever, that is probably a sign that there was emotional abuse involved, especially if you didn't feel it before that, right? Like I felt really good about myself before I met my ex. And I met him, and then after being in that relationship, I started to feel really bad about myself. I started to feel like I wasn't good enough at anything, that I wasn't a good mom, that I wasn't a good wife, that I wasn't a good Christian, that I wasn't a good housekeeper, that I wasn't a good anything. So, but I never really felt like that before I met him. So thinking back to your relationships and kind of where did this start? And again, it's not about like, oh, just blaming everybody else. Of course, they are to blame if they did that to you, but you have to take the accountability to heal. You have to take the responsibility, the ownership for how you feel, because that part's over, right? That part is in the past. But if you're dragging it along with you and you're like bringing it into the future relationships that you're in, it's going to continue. You're going to continue to feel bad about yourself. So that story has to change. The last one on my list, number 10, is if you are so confused, you can't even explain what went wrong and you feel broken. I hear this term all the time. I'm broken. And I have to tell you, if you are saying this to yourself, it's not true. And you might be like, but I feel broken. I feel like I can't stop thinking about these things. I feel like I can't move forward. I feel like my behaviors won't change. I feel like these habits are running the show. Like I feel like something is wrong with me, but you don't know why. The thing is, emotional abuse doesn't leave physical scars and bruises, but it leaves you confused. It leaves you doubting yourself, and it leaves these deep emotional scars. So if your soul deeply within you, your identity feels that hurt and feels that bruised, right? It wasn't just a nothing, okay? There was something there. Something happened to you. Something deeply disturbing. Emotional abuse is insidious and it permeates every cell of your body. And that's why it's so important, number one, to recognize that it was emotional abuse. Because if you are like, I don't know what's wrong, I'm just broken and I'm depressed and I'm sad and I can't dig out of this hole. Well, now you know. Like if you are resonating with any of these 10 things that I just rattled off, chances are it was emotional abuse. It's not you. There's not something inherently wrong with you. I do want to say this podcast is called the Be a Better You podcast. And the reason that I named it that, it used to be the Emotional Abuse Recovery podcast. We're still in recovery, right? But the reason I renamed it this is because I know that regardless of what happened to me, regardless of what other people did to me, that it's my job to be the best version of myself that I can, to show up for myself, to love myself, to be better. If I'm not doing that, no one else is going to do it for me. Okay? And if you're listening and nodding your head and you know that too, then I want you in my world. Because here's the thing. Without a real desire to change and be better, we're always going to be stuck. We're always going to be stagnant. Now, you might be saying, well, yeah, I do want to change, but I just don't know how. And I do want to show up for my family, for my kids, for myself. I want to do this so desperately. That is often not enough. The desire is the start, right? That's the spark. But what happens after that? You have to have a belief system that supports that desire. If you don't have a belief system that supports that desire, then it's never going to happen. And what I mean by this is, let's say that you are a person who says, I want to be more confident because that's going to help me help my kids. That's going to help me help myself in jobs, in relationships, in everything. Like, I want to feel that self-worth. I want to have that confidence. That's great. But the next part is the belief system that supports it. And things in that belief system would be like, I can do it. I am capable. I am worth this. I am good enough. Right? If you don't have a belief system that supports the desire, then the action will never follow. And if the action never follows, there can never be new habits established to help you get there. All right? So if any of these 10 signs made your stomach twist or your eyes water a little bit, maybe you felt a lump in your throat, I just want you to know something. None of this was your fault. You were doing the best you could to survive something that you maybe couldn't ever name. Just like me. I didn't know until someone on the internet told me. I wrote about it in my book. Like, I had no clue. I was in the dark. But now you're here. And now you can name it. And once you can name it, then you can heal it. So if this episode spoke to you and you're ready to go deeper, like I said earlier, I have many, many resources to help you. I have online courses. I have a community of women who get this and understand and show up. And my one-on-one coaching program is available to you as well. But I think, most importantly, it's taking that first step to just have a conversation. Schedule that 30-minute call with me and I'll help you. I'm not a scary person. I'm really nice, I promise. And I'm never going to push you or be pressury in any way. I just want to see if I can help. If I can, great. And if I'm not the right person for you, then, I will wish you well. And if I know somebody I can refer you to, I will certainly do that too. Okay, I just want you to feel good about who you are and be the best version of you that you can. So you're not alone. You never were. And healing is 100% possible. So if any of these things have resonated with you, please know that it wasn't you. It was emotional abuse. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.